What's going on, everybody? Cleopas Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Boost Mobile Celero 5G Plus and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Now, keep in mind, the purpose of this comparison is not necessarily to go over which one is explicitly better, since after all, the phone that originally had a price of almost $700 is clearly going to be better than the phone that's not even $300. But if you're in the market for a new phone and you're trying to decide whether you should get something a bit more affordable like the Celero 5G Plus, or spend a bit more money and get something higher end like the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, then this is definitely the comparison for you. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Boost Mobile Celero 5G Plus, we're getting a really large 6.95-inch 120Hz IPS LCD display with the 1080p resolution, a PPI of 386, and a 20.5 by 9 aspect ratio. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a 6.4-inch 120Hz dynamic AMOLED display. This phone also has a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 411, and a 19.5 by 9 aspect ratio. So in general, these displays are both good, but they each have their own advantages. On one hand, clearly here, the Celero 5G Plus is quite a bit larger, and I know a lot of people like really large displays. After all, at this point in 2023, I want to say the average smartphone nowadays is around 6.5 inches, which I would definitely consider on the larger side, so large displays are definitely popular. So if you are looking for something really large, maybe you're doing lots of reading, for example, and you want things to be a bit easier to see, then in that case, the Boost Mobile Celero 5G Plus will be a great choice. And not only this, but with a 1080p resolution and a 120Hz refresh rate, we are getting really nice image quality here too. So if you're doing something like watching videos, for example, then this phone will be a great choice. On the other hand though, maybe you're looking for something a bit more compact, or maybe you're not really that concerned about having a super large display, but you want better image quality. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, despite the Celero 5G Plus being, again, pretty good for what it is, the image quality with the S21 FE is quite a bit better. With the dynamic AMOLED, the display is a lot brighter, the colors are a bit richer, and the viewing angles are a lot better too. So if you're in maybe an outdoor environment, for example, or really in any kind of bright area, the S21 FE will be a lot easier to see. Now for storage, both phones here have 128GB of internal storage, so definitely plenty of storage here. But keep in mind, with the Celero 5G Plus, this phone does have microSD card expansion, whereas unfortunately, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE doesn't. And in general, this is definitely a more common drawback you typically find with higher end devices like this. So if you really do want to use a microSD card, then between the two, of course, the Celero 5G Plus will have an advantage. But in general, I feel like with 128GB, this is definitely a pretty decent amount of storage, so for the average user, you probably won't need more than this. But if you're in a situation where maybe your current phone already has a microSD card in it, and you want to be able to easily transfer all that stuff onto your new phone, then in that case, again, the Celero 5G Plus will have an advantage. But overall, if you're just looking for a phone that has a decent amount of storage, then either phone here will be perfectly fine. For security features, both phones have fingerprint scanners. With the Celero 5G Plus, it's right here on the power key, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, it's in the display. And keep in mind, with the S21 FE, we do have Face Unlock too, so definitely nice to get both options. But unfortunately, the Celero 5G Plus does not have Face Unlock. But real quick, let's give the fingerprint scanners a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the S21 FE. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners worked real well. But again, remember, the S21 FE does have Face Unlock, but the Celero 5G Plus doesn't. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Boost Mobile Celero 5G Plus, up front, we got a real nice looking hole punch design for the selfie camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. For video, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K here. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, up front, we got a similar design for the selfie camera. This camera is 32 megapixels. Then on the back, we get a triple camera setup with a 12 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. And then for video, this phone can record in up to 4K at 60 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras, so definitely nice to see there. So in general, in pretty much every way, the S21 FE does have a significantly better camera setup. Now one thing I do want to point out is that despite having a 12 megapixel camera versus again a 50 megapixel camera with the Celero 5G Plus, the S21 FE has much better hardware, so despite technically having lower more megapixels, the photo quality with this phone is still going to be a lot better. In addition to this, it does have a telephoto lens too, and not only is that going to give this phone some real nice optical zoom, but it's also going to help you get close-up detailed images, kind of like what you get with a macro camera. But meanwhile, with the Celero 5G Plus, this phone doesn't even have a macro camera, so you won't be able to do that here. But to be fair, at least this phone does have an ultra-wide camera, which when it comes to more entry-level phones like this, I don't want to say it's rare, but usually if they don't have both an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera, they'll just have a macro camera, and honestly, I feel like the ultra-wide camera is a lot more useful anyway. So in general, despite not having a ton of features, for what it is, I do think this phone has a pretty decent setup. Now to give you an idea of what these cameras can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the Celero 5G Plus. So overall, I feel like for what it is, being more of an entry-level phone you can typically find for less than $300. In fact, usually a lot less. It does at least get the job done, and for the average casual user, if you're really not going to be using your camera a ton but you still want to be able to take decent photos when you need to, you're really not going to go wrong with this phone. I mean, first stuff like Snapchat maybe, sending photos to friends and family, maybe taking vacation photos for your own memories, and even something like the occasional Instagram photo every now and then. I do think this phone will get the job done, but if you're really taking a lot of pictures and you want the best photo quality you can get for the money, then in that case you're probably going to be able to justify spending a bit more and getting something higher end with a better camera, because honestly, despite being at least decent, the photo quality here is really not that impressive, especially if you're more of a heavy camera user. And then here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, and I'm sure you can tell right away, when it comes to photo quality, the S21 FE is on a completely different level. So again, if you're going to be using your camera a lot, and you really want to get the best photo quality you can for the money, I do think the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is not only a much better choice than the Celero 5G Plus, but I feel like for what it is, for what you can currently get this phone for, it's really one of the best options in general. So if you are taking a lot of pictures, you want a good amount of features, and you want really good photo quality too, then this phone will be a great choice. Now for the RAM and processor, with the Boost Mobile Celero 5G Plus, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting 6GB of RAM here as well, with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 5G processor. So when it comes to performance between the two, this is most likely not a surprise at all, but the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is significantly faster. So if you're going to be on your phone a lot, especially doing more demanding activities like high performance mobile gaming for example, you will get a much better experience with the S21 FE. That being said though, I do want to point out that with the Celero 5G Plus, for what it is, I actually did find this phone to be pretty fast, and for more basic activities like web browsing, social media, streaming content like videos and music, and maybe some light mobile gaming, this phone will get the job done. And overall, if you're really not going to be using your phone a ton and you're really just looking for something for more of the basics, this phone will honestly be perfectly fine. But again, of course, if you are looking for the faster device between the two, then without a doubt, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is on a completely different level, so definitely keep this in mind. To give you an idea of what this difference really looks like, I ran a benchmark test on each phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So again, clearly here between the two, the S21 FE is quite a bit faster, so if you are going to be on your phone a lot doing more demanding activities, this is definitely something to think about, because in that case, even though the S21 FE is quite a bit more expensive, it is still honestly pretty affordable for what it is, and if you're really looking for a fast phone, then the extra money could be worth it. On the other hand though, if you're really just looking for something a bit more basic, just keep in mind, despite not being nearly as fast as the S21 FE, the Boost Mobile Celero 5G Plus is still decently fast for what it is. So if your needs are really not that complex, the performance you get with this phone will be perfectly fine. Now for the batteries, with the Celero 5G Plus, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery. This supports 15W fast charging, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a 4500 mAh battery. This supports 25W fast charging. And also keep in mind, both phones here do support wireless charging too, so definitely great to see. Now in general, on one hand, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE doesn't have a terrible battery, but keep in mind, compared to the Celero 5G Plus, it's not nearly as good. So if battery life is more important to you than, say, processing power for example, then in that case, you might want to consider going with the Celero 5G Plus. That being said though, again, with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, the battery life is at least decent, and in my experience, I haven't really had any issues. I mean, I've taken this phone on trips and stuff like that, and it's not like it dies in the middle of the day or anything, so for normal average use, I would personally still trust the battery here. But at the same time, between the two, if you really want the best battery battery life here, then again, the Celero 5G Plus will have an advantage. Now for the software, with the Celero 5G Plus, unfortunately this phone only has Android 12, and considering it is more of an entry-level carrier branded phone, I'm not expecting it to get any major updates either. So if you want Android 13 or later, then this definitely will be a drawback. On the other hand, with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this phone has Android 13, and with Samsung software support, you can also expect it to get Android 14, 15, and 16. So even though this phone is about a year and a half old now, it definitely has quite a few updates left. So in general, if having the latest version of Android is important to you, then clearly here, the S21 FE will have an advantage. When it comes to other features, in addition to having wireless charging, both phones here do have NFC too, so if you like to use tap and pay, you'll be happy to know you can use it with either phone no problem. But another thing I do want to point out here is that with the S21 FE, unfortunately this phone does not have a headphone jack, but the Boost Mobile Celero 5G Plus does. And while I'm not sure that this is actually a deal breaker for anyone, if you do really want a headphone jack, then of course the Celero 5G Plus will have an advantage. But in conclusion, which of these phones should you actually get? Now, this is really going to depend on your needs because on one hand, if you're really trying to maximize the value you're getting for the money, then even though in pretty much every situation, the S21 FE is going to be at least a bit more expensive, I would personally just go with this phone because even though it's again about a year and a half old, despite originally going for around $699 when it first came out, you can easily find this phone in the US at least for under $400. I think the one I linked to in the description is like $329. So considering this phone was designed as like the light version of the S22 or something, I feel like for $329, the value for this phone is really hard to beat. But on the other hand, not everyone really needs anything fancy, and in general, if you're really just looking for an entry-level 5G phone for more basic activities, you're not really that concerned about having the latest version of Android, a really fast processor, or a super nice camera, and you really just need something for watching videos, playing games every now and then, browsing the web, using social media, and really just using the phone as a phone, then keep in mind, despite not being quite as good as the S21 FE in most areas, the Boost Mobile Celero 5G Plus is honestly really cheap, despite going for around $289 full price. During the time I've had this phone, I've honestly never seen it not on sale. As of this recording, I believe it's going for around $59, and while it might not be that cheap by the time you're watching this, it really just goes to show that this phone is definitely really affordable. So with that in mind, if you really just want something affordable that gets the job done, the Celero 5G Plus will definitely be a great choice. But if you really want to maximize the longevity and overall value you get for the money, then again, I do think the S21 FE is definitely worth considering. But this concludes my comparison between the Boost Mobile Celero 5G Plus and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Celero Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.